I don't think the term below the line versus above the line is really carried over into the content creation or the videography world. It's kind of a film industry term, but it's an important one. And anybody who is either already a filmmaker or videographer or is aspiring to be one needs to understand one thing very clearly. And that's something that I learned way too late. It almost burned me out to the degree where I didn't want to do this anymore. And it's an unfortunate thing to get to that point. So before you get to that point, if you're feeling overwhelmed, overworked, burnt out, you're angry at the clients for continually asking you for revisions and not wanting to pay, you're tired of getting lowballed for what you do because clients don't really understand the value of what you do and how much work it is to make a cool video. If you're getting there or you feel like maybe it's heading in that direction, learn the term above the line versus below the line. And especially if you're in the independent film world as well, if your goal was to make creative stuff, tell your stories, whether it's films or shorts or what have you. The difference really is crew versus decision makers. It took me way too long to understand what a producer is. And the minute I realized I need to get away from the below the line mentality or mindset and marry my skill set with above the line skills, producing skills, company ownership and things like that, that in many ways saved my not just career but my marriage, my life in many ways, because I'm a high school dropout. I didn't have anything to fall back on, and filmmaking was the only thing I could ever see myself do. Again, not movies necessarily, although I have made them, but making videos. I probably spent the first 7 years of my career just deep diving into refining my skill set as a filmmaker, getting good at editing, getting good at shooting stuff, directing, writing, effects, After Effects, all that stuff, so that I could do everything myself, because people would just give me such ridiculous budgets, $3,000, $5,000 to make something that should really have a $20,000 or $30,000 budget, and I could do it because it was just me, and I didn't really feel the need or was really able to work with a team on something like that, because even if I knew how to find good crew and train them in on my processes, I would rather keep the money, especially when you don't have a good lead acquisition or customer acquisition process. You just have no clue where the next check is going to come from, so you milk whatever project you have to the best of your ability, and a lot of that requires you to just do the work yourself. It's not your fault if that's what you're doing right now, but you do need to understand that you're in this kind of glass bubble, and it's up to you to break out of it. You don't have to do it alone, but what's on the outside is really where you should be. The thing that maybe people don't want you to know, or that's being kind of held from you in some ways maybe, is that you can do what they can do, but they can't do what you can. I had a lot of producers and people give me work. What really pissed me off was once I started finding out what they were charging. I worked with ad agencies, I worked with other producers. You know, they'd throw me a few bucks, and then I'd find out somehow through the grapevines that they got like 50 times more. And after a few years of doing that, you got to start asking yourself, is this it? Is this where things are going to stay? And there's people who have been that way for 20 years, never breaking out of that little glass bubble. There were 3 things that happened that made me realize that I could do this, what I'm doing now, what I'm talking to you about. The first thing was I was forced by a timeline into either producing a documentary that I wanted to make in 2014 or letting it go, because it was a very unique opportunity. There was an event that was happening and I was either going to do it or not, and I really wanted to do it. And I connected with a friend of mine who was a film producer, and literally I was on the flight, didn't even know how I was going to pay for this thing, but I was on the flight and just kind of working with him and a field producer that we brought with us, raising money on the flight. So I that was the first time I really got a first-hand glimpse into raising money for my own movie. And by the time we were about a week into the shoot, we had raised enough money to get us through the whole couple of weeks that we were there, pay for all the hotels, the rental cars and everything. That was incident number 1, where I said, hey, you know, it's not actually that hard to get your money together yourself. Even though I had this guy to help, I was finally in on the process. The other thing that happened was I met an acting coach called Ivana Chubbuck. She's quite a successful acting coach and worked with some of the biggest actors. And she knew that I was a director. She said, look, if you really want to get good at directing, you need to come to my acting class and see how I work with actors. It'll make you a better director. So I did. And I did learn a lot about directing there, but what I learned there too was much more important. I saw how well actors were performing and how great their work was. And because they knew I was a filmmaker, they would talk to me and send me their reels. They knew I wasn't an actor or there for acting. They wanted to get to know me, and so we had dialogue. And a lot of them sent me their reels, and I realized that they don't represent them in any way like what they were doing there in that class. And I thought to myself, that's a really unfortunate situation because they're so talented and they've just been working on these kind of crappy gigs where maybe the directing's bad, the filmmaking's bad, and they look bad. That was a problem. And after a bit of talking, a couple of them asked me if I could maybe shoot a scene for them. So the light bulb didn't quite go off yet, but that was sort of incident number 2. Incident number 3 happened when a producer that I know came to me with a very odd contract. It was the biggest contract I had ever seen, and he was willing to split the profits 50-50 with me because this was a big one. It was a $500,000 deal, and it was for an educational company, and we were going to make 1,000 one-minute videos with kids, and we had a very limited timeline to do it. And he said, "Are you up for this?" And for a moment I had to think, there's no fucking way that I'm going to be able to make 1,000 videos with kids. I mean, that just seems like an astronomical task. And he kind of said, yeah, there's no way you're doing this alone. You got to put a team together. And I finally had the budget to do that. So I learned on the fly. We had a very tight deadline. He wasn't going to do anything. He had to fly off and make a movie or something. And so I was literally left as a person who had never hired anybody or delegated anything to basically having this mission and $500,000 to execute on this contract and not fuck it up. You learn how to produce real fast when there's that much money on the line and it's all on you. Those 3 incidents taught me 3 things. 1, it's not as hard to get your own films off the ground as you might think. 2, if you can solve a problem for somebody, your value goes up. And 3, working with teams is not as difficult as I made it in my head. And the only way to get bigger contracts is by working with a team. I didn't make a single one of those baby training videos. I made 1 or 2 of the reels for the actors and then realized I can turn this into a business. I made maybe 5 of them myself, and then I never made another one myself. My team made the whole thing. I put a team together and started scaling that. And whatever project I wanted to make, I was able to figure out a way to get it off the ground myself. The beauty of it is when you're a producer, it's not like you can't do the fun filmmaking stuff if you want to. But editing is such a time hog. Going on set, coordinating everything, dealing with clients, it's too much. And so what happens is you stay locked in and you can't get out unless you have some kind of a lucky break where suddenly you have some huge job where you can say, okay, now I'm going to use this to make some kind of a shift. But how do you even know what to do? How do you even know where to start? You don't want to risk it. So the natural instinct is, I'm a good editor, it'll be faster, it'll be easier, I'll just knock this out. That's actually really devastating to your career because you'll never get out of that prison. If you're a producer, you can choose whether you want to work on a job or not. You can handle multiple jobs at the same time. You can do big contracts and little ones. You can be on vacation while your team's working. You have the autonomy, creative, the financial, and the time to do what you want, when you want. It's not easy, but who becomes a filmmaker to have an easy life? Like, it's not supposed to be easy. You know, running a business has its own challenges. Being a producer has its own challenges. But I would much rather be on that side of it and have the autonomy and the flexibility while still being able to do the things that I want than to be in this constant perpetual hamster wheel. I did have some mentorship. I had some friends. I read every book that I could find. I took every course that I could get my hands on. I spoke to everybody I knew, the most successful people, the most successful producers, but also just business owners that I had come to get to know. And I slowly but surely figured out all the different processes that were necessary and was able to get myself out of that situation. It took a long time, it was very expensive, and it was incredibly tiring, and I don't recommend that anybody does it alone. Together, we're a lot stronger. In a community, everything is just easier in many ways because you have the confidence that comes back to you from other members. You can see what they're doing. You can learn from proven paths, and you have somebody there. You have many people there who are rooting for you and telling you where you're doing things right and where you maybe could adjust a little bit to actually get yourself across the line and start living above the line. So if this speaks to you in any way, there's an ebook that you can read by putting your email into this little form. And then there's a video where I tell you a little bit more about what I've done, how it happened, and how I help other people do it. It might not be for everybody, but for those that it's for those who need that change, it's the only place in the world like it. So come check it out. You might like it here.